The mysterious death of Dr. Palmer. Dr. Palmer, a prominent surgeon, is found dead in his office. Detective Miller is assigned to investigate the case. Miller examines the body and discovers that Dr. Palmer was shot in the head. Miller learns that there were no signs of a break-in and the office door was locked from inside. Miller questions the staff and patients, but no one saw anything unusual. Miller discovers that Dr. Palmer had been involved in a legal dispute with a former patient, Mr. Johnson. Miller starts to suspect Mr. Johnson may be involved in the murder. Miller also discovers that Dr. Palmer's ex-wife, Lisa, had been harassing him for money. Miller discovers that Dr. Palmer was having an affair with his receptionist, Jenny. Miller starts to suspect Jenny may have something to do with the murder. Miller also learns that Dr. Palmer had been embezzling funds from the hospital where he worked. Miller starts to suspect that someone at the hospital may have a motive for killing Dr. Palmer. Miller discovers that Mr. Johnson had an alibi for the time of the murder but also finds out that Johnson's son, who had a history of drug addiction, was recently treated by Dr. Palmer. Miller starts to suspect that Johnson's son may have a motive for killing Dr. Palmer. Miller also finds out that Lisa Palmer had a history of mental illness and had been recently released from a psychiatric hospital. Miller discovers that Lisa Palmer had been recently fired from her job as a nurse at the hospital where Dr. Palmer worked. Miller learns that Jenny had been secretly recording Dr. Palmer's conversations in his office. Miller finds a recording in which Dr. Palmer can be heard talking about his embezzlement scheme. Miller discovers that the hospital administrator, Mr. Peterson, had discovered Dr. Palmer's embezzlement and had threatened to report him to the authorities. Miller starts to suspect Peterson is involved in the murder. Miller finds out that Peterson had hired a hitman, Mr. Black, to kill Dr. Palmer. Miller discovers that the hitman stole a hospital keycard to gain access to Dr. Palmer's office. Miller finds Mr. Black and charges him with the murder. Miller also discovers evidence that implicates Peterson in the murder conspiracy. Miller arrests Peterson. Movie ends. At the trial, Mr. Johnson's son is cleared of all suspicion. Lisa Palmer is found to have been not involved in the murder. Jenny is reprimanded and let go from her job for the breach of trust. Dr. Palmer's embezzlement scheme is exposed, and the hospital takes corrective actions. Mr. Peterson is found guilty of arranging the assassination of Dr. Palmer and is sentenced to life imprisonment.